Welcome to the Uptime Wind Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall, along with my co-host, Joel Saxum. Today, we're diving into the renewable energy initiatives of Hatch, a global engineering powerhouse that's been shaping industries for nearly 7 decades. While Hatch is known for its wide-ranging expertise in metals, minerals, and infrastructure, we'll be shining a spotlight on their cutting-edge work in the renewable energy sector. From solar farms to wind turbines and battery storage, Hatch is at the forefront of the clean energy revolution. We'll explore how this employee-owned company is leveraging its vast engineering experience to tackle the complex challenges of transitioning to sustainable power sources. And in this episode, we'll discuss Hatch's projects with First Nation communities in Canada and how they're helping communities around the world access cleaner, more reliable energy. Our guests are Nathan Killeen, Wind Power Lead at Hatch, and Holly Brown, Senior Environmental Consultant at Hatch. Nathan and Holly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alan.
It's very nice to be here.
First off, I think we should introduce people that are not familiar to Hatch to all the thing that Hatch does. And if you haven't been on the website, you should go check it out. It's hatch.com. But Holly, you want to give some description of all the things that Hatch does do?
At Hatch, we refer to ourselves as entrepreneurs with a technical soul. So what that means is we're really a group of people who are passionately committed to the pursuit of a better world through positive change. So I think a unique differentiator for Hatch is that we embrace our clients' vision as our own, and we partner with clients to develop ideas that are smarter, more efficient, and innovative. We have a global professional network of over 10,000 people. We're in about 150 different countries all over the globe. And we have 3 primary sectors that we work in, and that's metals and mining, energy, and infrastructure. We're unique in the sense that we're employee-owned and independent, which means we're free to bring our best thinking to our clients' business needs. And our exceptional diverse teams combine not only the vast engineering and business knowledge, but we work in close partnerships with our clients to develop market strategies, manage and optimize production for their businesses, and really develop new game-changing technologies for design and deliver of complex capital projects. I think in summary, we tackle it tough, right? So we provide holistic solutions in this space. Another key portion of that we'll talk about later on is the community engagement and social performance. So directly working with the First Nations and Indigenous communities, that's their land, and we want to make sure that we deliver the project not only to our clients' needs, but also to the local communities. And that'll create lasting success for the project in general. So our exceptional diverse teams include technical entrepreneurs and technical solutions to our clients' challenges. And so those optimize practices across environmental protection, economic prosperity, social justice, as I mentioned before, and cultural vibrancy. So we really want businesses and the ecosystems and the communities to thrive, both now and into the future on our projects.
Yeah, and I want to get to some of the projects you're doing, but I think being in renewables, you have firsthand experience, both of you, of some of the complexities that are involved there. And I know when we had talked previously, we were talking about a specific project that was pretty complicated. So that's where I want to pick both of your brains today about renewable projects and kind of getting out to some more remote places and how Hatch has evolved that way. And maybe can we have Nathan describe what's happening with First Nations and the work that Hatch is doing there?
And what we're doing with some of these First Nations, multiple First Nations, these are very tough environments. A lot of these communities are remote. They're dependent on diesel gen sets. Fuel is very expensive. It's a fluctuating commodity. So a lot of these projects are the incorporation of, energy storage, solar, and wind. And the project that we're going to be speaking about today kind of combines all 3. And obviously, this helps on multiple fronts. It's obviously the nations that we're working with. This is their land, their environment. It's it's a sense of ownership. It's a sense of independence that we're working with them. Beyond just the, first principles of saving money and helping the environment, it's also the empowerment that this gives these peoples, in multiple locations. It's not only, obviously there's the difficulties of dealing in these environments. You have limited construction schedules, you're integrating different technologies. So one of the things that we really emphasize is, we have a microgrid solution and we're able to tie these things together. So it's just as, Holly said, we're working with the communities, to kind of provide them that energy independence that they're looking for.
So these projects, like something like this in the Northwest Territories, it's a renewable development project. While it may not be a 200, 300 megawatt project, it is a project on steroids, right? Because you're dealing with so many complications, logistics complications, stakeholder complications. Like there's just so much involved in it. And that's where Hatch thrives, right? Because you guys it's a one-stop shop. You come in, you have the technical expertise, you have environmental expertise, you have the civil expertise, like it's all there.
Can we do the turnkey projects? Absolutely. We're there, we can do standard solar, front-end design, owner's engineering, independent engineering. But where we really excel is kind of these multifaceted projects that are, harsh environments, technically difficult. We have a great stakeholder engagement, a great relationship with these communities. It's a project on steroids. There's not many consulting companies that can execute to the level that we can, because we understand this area. We have good engagement with the communities, and we're really, I think, we like to tackle the tough.
Yeah. I'll give you two examples, like for the listeners here, from my network of working in remote Canada. I worked in oil and gas exploration, right? So Nuiqsut, those kind of places. Like I've been there in the wintertime, and just getting food there for the crew, it takes dedicated personnel. The other one I like to say a lot is I have a really good friend. His name's Joe Welter, great civil engineer. But he worked for a company for 6 or 8 years, and they built hockey rinks. That's what they did. They traveled all over the world building hockey rinks, and they did a ton of them fly-in hockey rink building in northern Canada, like in these remote places. And the stories he would tell about, not only are we fighting logistics and getting materials and stuff here, but we're also fighting like bears off. And and he said, there's nowhere to, like, you got a crew here building stuff and these kind of things. There's nowhere to stay. You're sleeping in like some kid's bedroom. Like he's done that before. So, I mean, those are really kind of out there problems, but you guys having that knowledge and knowing how to work within these situations really brings a lot of value to the client as well.
Yeah, we have an entire division related to bear mitigation. That's, humane.
Those are problems we don't deal with in developing a wind farm in Texas. You don't have to worry about bears taking people out.
Yeah, I think the most I ever had to contend with, working on wind farms in Iowa was maybe the occasional white-tailed deer at about, 300 or 400 yards,
Not very voracious.
I was involved with a project on the airplane side of modifying airplanes to haul diesel fuel up to the Northwest Territories, and the Canadian government was involved in that. And at the time, I just remember thinking, we're hauling like maybe 50 gallons of diesel fuel out to these remote areas. How expensive that was. It was crazy expensive. So it makes sense now for those remote areas to get a hold of Hatch and to put in a wind and a solar and a battery storage system to get the dependency off diesel fuel and lower the cost. I think everybody misses how much cost that is.
Yeah, when you factor the logistics in of diesel fuel for a genset in Northwest Territories, you're paying $10, $12, $15 a gallon to get it up there. A lot of times it comes in like a 5,000-pound bag in the back of a DC-5 airplane. And they land it, drag the bag out, here's your fuel. Like, that's crazy. Like, if you can get away from that. And that's what Hatch does. That's what you guys are delivering for the First Nations in that area, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, listen, diesel gensets are still a reality. You need it for the rotating inertia, you need it for grid, but we're moving towards, obviously a synchronous condenser is going to be prohibitively expensive for something like that, but that's why we're including the energy storage. I mean, and this is, you guys hit the nail right on the head. I mean, it's the footprint is not only, the emissions and, the pollution from that genset, but it's getting it up there. Like, what are those overall costs, right? Now you may have somebody coming in to, perform an annual maintenance. Okay, that still has a footprint, but you're not bringing in, you're not, you'd be better off just sending the plane maybe, just with the fuel. So, I mean, I think you make a very good point there, Alan.
So what is the approach been with some of the First Nations on changing their energy future? And how does that set up Hatch? Because you can tap into so many different disciplines within one company, which is amazing. Where do you start off here?
Where do we start? We have a entire Indigenous engagement team. That is all they do day in and day out. And so they're a great resource to us. And really, I think it's about meeting the community and the people where they are with the values that they have and understanding where they've come from, what their land looks like. Do they have the experience with developers or whatnot coming in, contaminating their land? Maybe not involving them in the process. So we really understand, I think, from the project inception, and conceptually, we understand the connectivity and the critical need for that alignment piece between integration between project delivery, social performance, Indigenous engagement, managing those communities, involving them, educating them, and building sort of a holistic path forward where everyone is on the same page, including the stakeholders, right? Including all of the components, all the logistics that go into this, and then actively involving the local Indigenous First Nations community. It's a critical part of any project success, particularly in Canada where there's such a large focus. I do believe in the US we could do better on this front, having seen all that we do in Canada. That's sort of my perspective on where we start. It really starts from inception, project planning, getting all those different teams involved on the social community engagement, Indigenous First Nations, and integrating them with the technical project team to see how we're going to deliver something that is suitable for all parties involved.
It's a partnership. It's not just the project is the outcome of that partnership, so it's like, and the benefit, I think, again, the point of any renewable energy project, of course, is to lower costs. And then in a lot of cases here, for these bigger projects, you have a PPA, it's economic. The drivers behind that are economic. Of course, in these projects, there's always economic drivers, but it's really that partnership. And it's like, I think we look at it as a holistic, it's not a problem, but it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to better a community. But again, we're not, we're part of the answer, but we're not the solution. We're working with those communities to, help them come to, a good outcome.
Well, we could use you in the States with a number of wind and solar projects where it doesn't seem like the community is that engaged before the digging starts, and what a disaster that turns into. So I'm glad you actually have a whole group of people devoted to that. That's amazing. And once you get buy-in or get to some sort of agreement with the community, what happens next? There must be, I'm just thinking out loud here, but anytime we get into any sort of a renewable energy project, the first thing is like, all right, I got permits, I got government oversight, I have all these check boxes I have to do before I can even put the first spade in the ground. Is that similar in the Northwest Territories, that same sort of regulatory structure, or is it a little more freedom there?
I think, what it comes back to is we do have this holistic and kind of like different professional services. And part of that is our permitting team. And I think they work hand in hand with these communities. And a lot of it, again, is getting, boots on the ground, community engagement. But the motivations, every project is different. Every First Nations community is, every situation is unique, right? And so I think where we really excel at is that we understand and we really emphasize those details. And, we're working hand in hand with, in some cases it's working directly. The First Nations community might own the assets. In others, it's a power company delivering to those. So, the devil is in the details. And I think, we're excelling at, listening and then, understanding it's a partnership. But again, this is that I think it's that entrepreneurial spirit that Holly spoke about. This is not just a line item on our budget sheet. It's a real project that affects people.
Yeah, and I think the regulatory environment in Canada is it is different from the U.S. in this space. That comes with some complexities, but I wouldn't say it's fundamentally easier or more difficult, right? It's just a different set of, whether or not you're working with provincial, federal regulations in Canada. It's a little bit different than the U.S. kind of mix, but very similar in terms of permitting. Timelines may differ a little bit depending on where you are and what sort of regulatory approvals you need in order for you to then go dig in the ground. But yeah, it is different for sure.
I think that there's something, Alan mentioned it as well, and I'd like to double down on it, that the Hatch approach to getting these projects off the ground is something that could very well be needed in the United States, because we see this. I mean, we covered on the podcast a lot, right? Like the pushback from small communities and counties and townships and stuff, like, and the moratoriums on solar and wind, and they seem politically driven. That's my opinion. I'm just saying that a lot of times it's politically driven rather than technically driven. But if you could get in, and sometimes it's because people feel like the projects are being shoved down their throat. Like they think big business is coming in here and they're going to do whatever they want. And if you could get on the ground and get boots on the ground and conversations with stakeholders at an early stage, you can really get this thing, designed well and moving. Because at the end of the day, we know how to build wind farms. We know how to build battery storage systems. We know how to build solar farms. Like, we can do it, but we need less opposition and more access to that land to get it done. I wish that other people would take the approach. I wish that more people would get that, it's a PR approach, and that needs to happen more.
It is, Joel, and I think it's a soft skill, right? It's that communication sort of psychology component that is unfortunately lost in a lot of engineering and science firms. It's rare that you have, a PhD with a psych degree. That's an odd combo, but I always say that's such an asset in this business, because really, when communities outright, in my opinion, based on my experience, when they outright reject a scope of work and there hasn't even been any discussion, like you said, it could be, being shoved down their throats. But typically it comes from fear, right? They may not have a say. They're concerned about X, Y, Z. What is this going to do? I mean, it could be anything, right? It could be, am I going to get cancer from this windmill that you're putting in here? I mean, I've seen people say all sorts of things. So to have that level of scientific wherewithal, technical prowess, and excellence, coupled with that social communication component when you're first at project inception. Again, it all kind of goes back to project inception and getting that team in place, boots on the ground, maybe putting out a community letter and opening it up for questions. I mean, that is something that I think is not done enough in the States. Why? Because it can be difficult, right? It can delay the process, but in my opinion, it can also accelerate the process, because the more you can have buy-in from the communities and everybody up front, typically, the faster and smoother the project will run.
I think at a certain level, there's an ethics conundrum there, right? The people that most of the time where a wind farm or solar farm is being built is going to be in a heavily conservative area, right? You're in the middle of the Midwest, or you're in Texas, you're in Oklahoma, you're somewhere in farm country in general. And that's where I am here in rural America. And nobody likes to be lied to or feel like they've had the wool pulled over their eyes. But that seems to happen, or I'm not gonna say it seems to happen, but it seems like the opinion is that it happens quite often with renewable energy projects. And if you can get in front of that with community engagement, otherwise you're fighting the landowners for 20, 25 years. That's just the reality of it, right? Every time a generator goes down and you got to move a crane in for a wind turbine or something, it's on Facebook and it says all these things, blah, 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 and then you start to get this misinformation spreading, and because people are angry and all these different things. So I think that that what it sounds like here. Now, I don't know the Hatch approach. I've never worked with you guys, but what it sounds like, what you're telling us, and what Alan and I've done a bit of research on the background is that's how you approach things. That's what we like to hear. That we're bringing good news. We feel right now.
I've seen different approaches, community engagement, and some is like, I'm sorry you didn't put the turbine on that piece of land that you owned. And, people respond in some parts of the country, with a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, that sometimes leads to repairs of said turbines.
That's true. That's a true statement.
I think kind of like what we try to do, and I think is more successful, like we're talking, it's kind of like that rule of 10, in manufacturing. If you catch it in design, it's always going to be more expensive the further it goes down the line.
Let's talk about the finance piece, because I that is the linchpin to most projects. If there's no financing, projects do not move forward. But the community aspect of that is sometimes overlooked. And a financial group doesn't want to be involved in some sort of conflict if they can avoid it. Does getting the community bought in or to be part of the process, does that help on the financing side and just sort of speeding a project up and getting more access to funds?
On the financial front, maybe not necessarily opening up more avenues for financials, but I think it creates, as an engagement or a project manager, it creates having that community engagement up front, essentially a more streamlined path through your financials that have already been developed for that project, right? Because you're not potentially encountering as many hurdles and therefore delays and therefore stop work, right? All of that to a project manager, engagement manager is just dollars going out the window. So I do think it helps on that front.
On a larger context, what does the community engagement for Hatch look like going forward? What have you learned over the last several years that now is being implemented as you reach towards new projects?
From my perspective, the sooner the better. Earlier engagement is always better. Again, so I think understanding that connectivity and that critical need for alignment and integration. Moving forward, it's just an optimization in my mind off of what we've already developed over the last, 70 years now at this point. More if you're looking at hydropower, as Nate mentioned, last 100 years. A century, a breadth of such experience in dealing with all these different types of communities and First Nations and engagement of Indigenous peoples. That's how that team was formed, years ago, knowing and realizing there was such a critical component to the success of our projects. And we needed that expertise in that, social, environmental governance, of these communities and First Nations. So I think that's sort of where I see it. It's a refinement and optimization over time. And I think every project that we do, we also have, lessons learned at the end of the project, that there's anything, that we can take moving forward. Like, hey, was this difficult? How did this work with this community? Okay, well, yeah, right. We had this over here and this worked well, but this is a little bit different of a situation. Maybe this community, now they're looking at, potential wind farm, but they were just looking at mining contamination, right? So it's like knowing that history of that land as well, not just the Indigenous peoples, but knowing, is it fresh greenland or is it a brownfields? Have they been dealing with people coming in and out, consultants, stakeholders, regulators for decades, and they're just done? Like, what's the pulse on them? So I think each project we do, each refinement we go through, it's just always great to learn and to share and communicate that internally via the Hatch Hub that we have, internal news sharing, blogs, project shares that we do. Continual refinement.
Especially when it comes to these projects, there's two things that I would say. We have a mantra kind of doing our homework, and I think that's what this community engagement is about. And then it's like we're acting like owners. And so it just speaks to that partnership.
Wow. Well, this is why Hatch is so important to the industry, is that you're well-rounded and you have the staff to do projects right and to set it up for success. That's really impressive. Well, Holly and Nathan, this has been tremendous. I've learned so much in a short amount of time, and really impressive work. And if anybody wants to connect with Hatch, probably the easiest way is to go to hatch.com and get on the website and see all the projects and the engineering and experience they have. It's amazing. So Holly and Nathan, thank you so much for being on the program.
Absolutely. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. And thank you so much, Alan, Joe, Claire. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much.